Good morning. Thank you all for joining us here at the Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit. This is Leaders of Change and our Oppressive Systems Workshop. I'm your facilitator, Amber Thompson, and I have my co-facilitator here, Kim Kaplan. So again, this is Oppressive Systems, and I clicked a little too fast. I'm the founder and principal consultant for Leaders of Change, and this is I provide change management services to assist companies in complex problem resolution by assessing organizational change through race, gender, and an equity lens. And the equity lens includes all intersections of race and gender, such as disability or status, socioeconomic class, age, and all other intersections of marginalization. And today we are just going into intros for a couple minutes, then we'll be breaking down definitions that we'll be using throughout this workshop. Then we'll get into the actual workshop itself, where we are walking through critiquing boundaries. And then we're gonna wrap it up with some dialogue and more reflection on what we spoke about today. And now I'm gonna kick it over to Kim to share house rules for everyone who is participating today.
Thanks, Amber. So this morning, everyone will be muted by default, but we want this session to be interactive. So we'd like you to participate. You can always ask a question or add a comment in the chat. Due to time constraints, though, we may not read every chat out loud. So we're going to try something a little bit different this morning. You will be able to unmute yourself to also chime in. But if that gets a little too unwieldy, we'll go back to our usual format, which is that you can raise your hand and then we'll call on you and unmute you. We ask that if you are verbally interacting with us, that you keep your questions or comments brief, maybe about 30 seconds. But sometimes that can turn into a back and forth dialogue. So I apologize in advance now if I mispronounce your name when I call on you, and we hope that you'll join in on this discussion.
Thanks, Kim. So what to expect during this workshop is we will be identifying the inequities that exist in community development and navigate our actions to dismantle this system. After this workshop, you will be introduced to heuristic questions, the theory of marginalization, shared definitions, and a process to critique boundaries. Again, this is interactive, so please respond to the questions and ask questions throughout the session. You can also put your questions in the chat, and you could chime in or use the raise hand feature. So let's just jump right in. And my computer must be slow. So basically, in oppressive systems that we're working on are targeting anti-Blackness through root system analysis. So in the work that I do, most change management processes have some type of legacy rooted in anti-Blackness, mainly because most theories and practices are created in our academic institutions, which are structures of white supremacy. So when we're talking about system today, we're talking about a whole that's compounded of parts. So we are looking at how we can make small changes that collectively impact the whole system. So the parts of the whole. Oppressive systems are systems that severely discriminate against some groups and benefits other groups. In regards to the oppressive systems, we'll be looking at as an institution, covert racism. Covert racism originates in the operation of established and respected forces in society, and this receives far less public outcry than overt racism, like police brutality. So in community development, a lot of tools, a lot of processes that are established and norm normal, they are parts of a covert racist system. Then in regards to systemic and systematic, the definition that we'll be using for systemic is something that entirely affects the system versus systematic, and those are the methods to affect a system. So we'll be looking at the systematic changes to address systemic issues. Typically they're used interchangeably, but in my work, they're two different things. Marginalization, the voices in society that are excluded by actors, making a narrow boundary judgment. So the folks that are silenced, either or underrepresented, minoritized, those are the folks that are marginalized, in the process at which this happens that we'll be talking about today is marginalization. Actors versus acted upon. Actors are the decision makers. Acted upon are the folks that are impacted or marginalized. Boundaries are the perspectives of what's valued and devalued. I'm realizing that those definitions are backwards. Values are things that you believe are important, used as constraints to motivate behavior. And interventions are the things that we can do, not traditionally not mental models, but actually actively partaking in some kind of change. So Ethereal Marginalization was created by Gerald Midgley. He's a professor at Hall University. Basically, the Ethereal Marginalization has two boundaries, and what we'll be focusing on today is the primary boundary versus the secondary boundary. And this when I do my work, what I'm looking at is this image constantly in my head. Because what we're trying to do is critique the boundary so we can expand the primary boundary to the secondary boundary to include all of the values of marginalized people. So where we're at today is the conflict that we are experiencing, or as a Black woman in America have experienced my entire life for 35 years. What happens is usually the way the system functions is in conflict with my values, and the conflict arises once I am not part of this primary boundary. And what we want to change are what's valued as part of the primary boundary and what's devalued. So we want to blend, and we want to unite to expand from the primary to the secondary. So marginalized folks exist in between the primary and secondary boundary. And whenever why we focus on anti-Blackness is mostly all of our marginalization exists there. And if we help and support in an equitable fashion to uplift Black voices, we expand the boundary to include everybody. So we want to demonstrate the connections between different people, and that's how we blur these boundaries. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat. I lost the chat box. There we go. So how we do this is a series of questions called heuristic questions. Heuristics are shortcuts to solve really complex problems, but quickly, and using patterns, being present, including some historical pieces, having an idea of what your future wants to look like. The heuristic questions are a great way to be more intentional about building on concepts and patterns and theories as you're trying to make decisions. And the heuristics we'll be using were developed by Werner Ulrich. He created a set of decision-making questions to critique boundaries and systems.
Hey, Amber, we have a question in the chat.
Yep.
From Hugh. Can you give real-life examples of primary and secondary boundaries?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. We're here today on community development, and I will give you a great example. Community plans. This is something that I'm actually actively working on. And currently the primary boundary of community plans, which I believe we'll get into this during the workshop as well, but just to give you a great example, the primary boundary of community plans right now consist of folks that can participate in community meetings, right? Folks that can be there presently, physically, folks that can have a voice, folks that are affluent and can contribute, money or resources or social capital. And the secondary boundary are the folks who cannot be at the community meetings, that do not have resources, that do not have the capital to buy a lawyer to challenge the community plans or to challenge developers, right? Or to challenge investments, or to advocate for a certain or like you think about transportation, bus stops, right? The primary boundary of these services exists for folks who can access it, can make demands on it because of their capital, or are thought of as thought leaders in that space. The secondary boundary are folks who are either older, disabled, children, poor, Black. There are just so many folks that exist in the secondary boundary through our community plans that the community plans represent a specific demographic that can be there. So I hope that was a great example. Please let me know in the chat if that worked. But I think a lot of folks understanding community development, even in the non-traditional sense, can see how communities not engaged as a primary in the primary boundary. I just realized that the chat that I see is not the chat, because once you said that, I don't see that question.
That was sent directly to me. That's why it's not in the main chat.
Okay, great. Okay, so basically what we're gonna work on is how what we're doing relates to the primary boundary and how what we should be doing relates to the secondary boundary. And we'll be discussing what happens in between, that is the marginalization. So our first question, again, I'm gonna ask a question. We need you all to respond in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and discuss. We, spend 30 seconds sharing your feedback. I will probe, so be prepared for that. So we're gonna get started. Thinking about from your perspective, either in your personal experience or your professional or your line of work, who is the client in community development?
Someone's asking maybe citizens, the people being
Citizens?
served, residents, community members, businesses, those living there, those in the community, foundations who are paying for things.
Yep. Okay, great. Now I'm seeing this chat. Yeah, no, definitely whatever your first thought is, share that. Because that is going to be important, Gabe. Client is the company.
Students as well.
Yes, definitely students, college, non-traditional, elementary, high school, clients in the companies. Yes, yep, affluent. Yes, yes, for-profit developers doing, yes, if they engage the community. Oh, homeowners, that's a good one. Homeowners are definitely part of the community. So then who should be, oh yes, future residents, that's a great one. Who should be the client in community development? Now, when we're asking this, thinking about all of the answers we had, we want to break this down further, right? We have students, we have affluent, for-profit developers, homeowners, future residents, clients, community, the members, foundation, citizens, those living there, the community that's struggling currently. Unhoused neighbors, yes. Folks who've been displaced, yes. BIPOC, marginalized, struggling, small community-owned businesses. It's COVID, yes. Yep, society as a whole, yes. Working people who need a variety of ways to speak up. Thank you, Marilyn. Low income, people currently living in the neighborhood, people currently excluded from the neighborhood. Yeah, excluded is a great word. That right there is what happens between the primary and secondary boundary.
Those with minimal resources.
Yeah. Oh, yes. If we really picked on certain neighborhoods, yeah, minimal education. And as we get through, well, that minimal education piece should not be part of any boundary. But that's how it is, right? Kids, definitely kids
Yeah.
of all ages. Oh,
Formerly incarcerated. Yeah.
that's a great one. Yes. Currently incarcerated as well. Low income, elderly, and disabled people who live in the building. All the people need good low income housing, BIPOC. These are all great answers, folks. Yeah, we do. We definitely need to use the kids more. There's a very interesting, I can't think of where I saw it, but it was talking about children. If we just threw theory at children, they'd be the best at processing it and telling us what's wrong with it. Those that lack transportation. Yeah, exactly, Thomas. Refugees could be secondary boundary if they don't have language. Hi, Rui. So sorry. So we're gonna move on to the next question. Time check, 9:20. So what is the function of the primary boundary in community development?
Profit. Yeah.
Dave just went straight for it. Yeah.
Money.
Money, 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 money.
Power. Yeah. To benefit some, but not all.
Marilyn said it, not me.
Power and control. Yep. Influence.
Ooh, influence. Lots of your favorite. Yeah, they are. If we could organize, making decisions, keeping the division, status. Lots of white people. Appreciate that, Gabe. Supporting established, oh yes, perpetuating that system, maintaining it. Thank you, Julius. I think we're definitely all with Gabe on that one. Comfort, safety, in quotations. Chris is on to something there. Property values, ooh, back to that profit. Let's talk about what should be the function of community development. I think especially whenever we're trying to create equitable community development, being as explicit as possible is the best way to be. So when we say how should it function, Marilyn's saying inclusion. Yeah, our community development should be inclusive of all the folks we explained, we shared who should be the client in community development. Voice, ensuring everyone's needs are heard and met. I mean, if we're going to call it equitable community development, is it really community if only a certain handful of folks is actively part of it? Is it community, or should it be called affluent development, right? I'm that person. Meet the needs of the community, what they say their needs are. Yes, we need to meet folks where they are. The communities are the experts. I always say that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Who is the decision maker in the primary boundary throughout community development? And we could look at it in the phases, or you can look at it from the perspective of education.
Oh,
Oh,
it sounds like someone wants to chime in.
oh,
Oh,
no.
maybe not. You can add it in the chat if you'd like.
Yeah.
So decision maker, oh, I think these are still on needs: low income housing, jobs, support for small businesses, and transportation.
Mm.
Can
Okay, so
can you guys hear me?
we can now. Go ahead.
Okay, this is more just like a comment. I've been working in a nonprofit for quite some time and been on kind of like the forefront of the work with like the direct contact with clients and the needs, and being a woman of color and actually experiencing my own struggles. You always get the blueprint handed to you from people who have never experienced the work that you are doing on the forefront. And it's so challenging for someone to say, yes, for an example, let's eliminate homelessness in the city of Pittsburgh by creating the system. But does the system really work? Does it work because you believe it can, and because you read a book, or because you've seen it in a movie? Or does it work because you got the feedback from our frontliners, or from the people who are suffering, or the people in the communities, to say this is what we need to make it work? That's it.
Can you
Sorry,
share your name, please?
Hi, my name is Markia Lowry, and I'm here representing Post Pittsburgh. That's me.
Thank you, Markia, for sharing that. I think that's very, very important to say, especially in community development, especially in regards to these blueprints as well, right? When folks just have names of people they interviewed that are either established, or I feel like a lot of Black folks in the city of Pittsburgh, their positions and titles and names have been tokenized to support these blueprints and plans. And it's very obvious that the people who created these do not know how to engage marginalized communities. And it's very important to call that out. And I can't stress this enough. It's not enough to feel uneasy about a plan and then go implement it. You have to, equity is about doing these questions for every decision, not just, oh, I thought about it and like maybe this person's been excluded. Maybe we should think about this more. No, let's anticipate excluding people from the gate, and let's not tokenize folks because we don't want to engage the community, because we don't know how to talk to Black people, because we don't know how to talk to refugees, or we don't know how to talk to poor folks. And it mainly comes out of the fact that, your identity or your bubble, but we need to just get more comfortable in cleaning everyone. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. We talked about who should be the decision maker. I'm gonna kind of
Yeah,
scroll.
we had a couple of comments on that. The real estate agencies, lawyers, developers, who is the decision maker right now?
Real estate, what was it again, Kim?
Agencies, lawyers, and developers.
I would say political parties are part of community development, especially because they lobby on behalf of their own parties' decisions or interests, or they politic, I guess is the better word to say. So political parties are most certainly part of community development.
We've also got people commenting big business, the wealthy white, funders, lobbyists, as you said, zoning board, planning commissions, universities as investors, banks, Buell and other foundations.
Definitely all of those. They are the decision makers. Sorry, I guess the trash is picking up now if you can hear that. Registered community organizations. Folks who aren't from Pittsburgh the city of Pittsburgh has a process where they register a community organization to be a representative organization for a community. So while some communities have multiple community organizations, the city will recognize one specific as the contact for that community. And the plans are acknowledged in the city plans. URA. I definitely think think tanks are there. I would say think tanks are the covert part of community development, and where folks really don't traditionally know where the think tanks exist. We have think tanks and do tanks. Or think and do tanks, and especially within our universities here. So think tanks are definitely part of community development in the sense that they are fleshing out policy. They're finding stakeholders and partners in lobbying as well. So who should be the decision maker? In Walmart is definitely, yeah, Walmart is definitely a decision maker. Who should be the decision maker in community development?
Residents. The community.
It is so simple, right? But it's not community development. It's, again, affluent development. So calling out community is being explicit about how we develop equity or equitably.
The people who are going to be impacted by the decisions of the community developers.
Again, it shouldn't even have to be said, but we need to talk about it.
People of all income levels and demographics.
And that is where we need to continue to be explicit, right? All income levels. Have we identified the most marginalized folks who don't even have income or who can't have sustainable income? I see some.
Marilyn, did you want to chime in?
You're just reminding me, years ago, I live in Monroeville, Walmart wanted to move in. They had a big meeting, and the people that came, they had a program that they were going to present to us and just steamroll us. And people took over the meeting, the residents lined up for questions and didn't let them talk.
Wow.
And Walmart did not come.
I have to say, Monroeville has a very strong presence in regards to like not allowing big corp like Walmart or even UPMC.
Well, UPMC got it. Braddock got
wanted to. Yeah. Yeah, Monroeville is a very great example of constantly fighting those large corporations. Thank you for sharing that, Marilyn. I don't think folks, I'm from Johnstown, so Walmart's one of our only places to shop. But in Pittsburgh, Walmart's outside the city. And when we think about why is Walmart outside the city, you think about the city and their zones and how they don't want big business like that.
Wondering why that was.
Go ahead, Dave. Dave?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize we were unmuted.
Okay. Some people also commented those with disabilities. And then there's other comments that, there's a fear of talking to poor people and people of color, that developers think that they know better. A lot of community development processes talk over people, don't bring the information down to a level that everyone can understand. Thinly veiled capitalism in the guise of altruism. Someone says Target's coming to downtown Pittsburgh.
Yeah, talking about Target, I believe Target had made some deal with the city. I will say, out of these larger institutions or these larger corporations, it's so hard to say this. Target is trying. Doesn't mean I believe it, but they're trying, and they want to do local hiring, and they want to do development and get back to community. They are actively developing underrepresented talent within their organization. Their leadership is somewhat diverse. If that is a metric, it's not for me, but
I don't know if I may just throw this out there, and if
Mhm.
this is too much of a tangent and you don't want to go here in the discussion today, that's fine. But just because it came up, I live near downtown, and I work downtown, and um, you know, I, you know, I would, part of me really welcomes Target coming in, because I want to be able to shop downtown, close to where I live. And I think, I live in the Lower Hill, and there's not a grocery store now in downtown or the Lower Hill. So there are many ways in which Target coming in, it will be a benefit to the community. And, at the same time, I am anti corporatization, and so I have mixed feelings about it for that reason. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that in this case, I'm not completely opposed to Target coming in.
no, Chris, thank you for sharing that, because I think when someone asks for like a real life situation, this is a great example, because you're right. How are we finding the balance between what the needs of our community and the needs of developing a community, and the needs of reinvesting in a community? And I mean, out of Target and Walmart, I prefer Target over Walmart any day. But there's still, I think it was Marilyn had commented, affordability, accessibility, right? Target will be accessible to majority of the region because it is downtown with the bus stop, and the Target in East Liberty has the EBA, the other large bus route. But is Target the best place to buy your groceries? So yeah, the busway, thank you. Some folks can afford it. I sometimes can't afford it. I also go to Target and don't pay attention to what I went in there for either. So but yeah, I think that's a great example of like the conflict that arises, right? How do we balance what all these different needs and all these different people? How are we equitably leveraging Target? If Target's going to be here, what are we getting out of this? And then how can we also support the folks who can't afford to shop at Target? We can't just bring Target and be like, well, you got a grocery store, so that's what you asked for. Like, no, we want to be able to afford our groceries. How can we still have a Target and an affordable option? Preferably get rid of Target, but we have food deserts all over the city of Pittsburgh. We can't support the food deserts by bringing in Targets. We can't. That's not sustainable. Thanks, Kim. So we're gonna get through. Where are we at? Okay. What is the expertise or knowledge that's brought in for community development?
And I just want to say, I appreciate all of the engagement we've had so far this morning.
Yeah.
It's great to see so many people are awake and ready to go. So we've got big business, planning, architecture, design, architects, urban planners, outside companies, universities. Let's see here. This is a question, I think, for the audience too. Bankers, financial planners, placemaking, branding, politicians, building codes, marketing experts. There's a question here too about what people think of small bodega markets as a grocery source.
That's actually a great question. I don't have any bodegas in my community, and I've never really lived in a place. Okay, now I'm thinking about when I lived in Manchester, there was one right up the street. I would go there. The bodegas are in North Side where I lived at. They were all my minority owned. Yeah. I went to well, I definitely went there before I would shop at 7-Eleven. But their hours were outside of the hours or their hours were inside my work hours. That was really my struggle with where I was at. That's a great question. One I want to add to everyone's comments too that I feel like is definitely not thought about is economists. All of this development, there are analysts who are 10 years, 20 years out figuring out what is going to drive, what are the motivators for behavior for people to invest or be part of developing communities or reinvesting, right? Do bodegas have fresh produce? Don't One I went to did.
Yeah, I think in the question they said, not the ones with chips and candy, but the ones with meat, vegetables, fruits.
Yeah. Dave sharing, there's a couple good models for corner stores prioritizing fresh and healthier foods instead of cigarettes and lotto. 52nd Street Market, yeah, and one in Hazelwood.
Whoever mentioned Dave, there used to be in Hazelwood, I lived in Hazelwood for about 10 years, and there was a local grocery store that was there probably for the 8 years that I was living in Hazelwood and there before. And a lot of residents used that market. I mean, it was a Giant Eagle, maybe 2 miles up the block in Greenfield, but it was utilized. And there was a lot of businesses. I just think about East Liberty. Every time I just think about, the gentrification and just the redevelopment, I always think about East Liberty. There was so much culture, so much life, so much love, despite the things that happened. There was still so much culture in East Liberty. And thinking about, there was a lot of community engagement with the community members before they tore down a lot of the property in East Liberty, and they made all of those promises, and and they probably did house some of the residents that were in the previous development. But I just think about East Liberty every time I think about this topic, and it has changed so much. The culture of East Liberty has huge shift.
In regards to East Liberty, to expand on that, what I'm afraid of is a lot of folks across the city don't know what happened in East Liberty. They don't know the history. They know it was this and now it looks like this, but they don't know that pathway. They don't know that timeline, or they don't understand that timeline to understand how it got gentrified like that in preparation of their own communities having that type of development. And now where they're at is there are organizations to rehouse those folks that were displaced. And it's nowhere near what was pushed out. Yeah, Lawrenceville, talk about losing people. Lawrenceville lost a ton of Black people. And we're not really talking about how these things happen in these communities, especially on the East Side, in preparation of it happening in Hazelwood or Homewood, or even in the South in Arlington or Knoxville. Like, those communities are going, or along the river. All of these communities, why am I blocking on West Side? I was like, why is that cardinal direction not working? Those communities are coming down the pipeline, being developed. We need to really have a explanation for what happened in East Liberty, so we can make those demands on the front end and go through these questions, go through these concepts as we're trying to figure out what these communities, how we should be engaging these communities. So we'll move on to, what expertise and special knowledge or experience should be brought in. And what we want to expand on in regards to these folks, yeah, definitely have been targeted. I feel like I hope there is a conversation about why Black communities are targeted, and how land, if Dave could like chime in on that, definitely how land, um, in the expense of land, why Black communities are targeted. I would love to talk about that. Maybe I should just do that on my own. So when we're talking about who should be considered as expert, farmers, farmer markets, urban farmers, yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, definitely focusing on the food. Who should be brought in as an expert in regards to a playground? Kids and dreamers, yes. Thank you, Jessica. That's what I was trying to get at. I don't think we tap children enough. People with disabilities, absolutely. I complain when people say, if you're not part of the community process. I'm like, well, folks with disabilities are not part of the community process, so we're not allowed to have a voice. Parents can't be part of this process. I work, I have a child with disabilities, I'm taking care of my mother, I'm trying to run a business. Like, parents are struggling. The same areas that are getting gentrified today were the ones that were redlined years ago. Keep that in mind. Again, the legacy. All of this has historic roots. Economic divestment presents lots of opportunity for capital. Buy low, sell high. That's why Black communities are being targeted. Black communities are also, due to white flight, pushing out to the suburbs. Black communities were inner city, where we're closer to transportation, the river, bridges, walking, the walkability of the inner city. Now white folks want to come back into the city, and Black folks get displaced to the outer limits where they can't have transportation or walkability. Low property rate, they turn high through gentrification, they claim cleanup, flipping, and unity, but I think
There are also comments about educators and artists being experts that could be brought in, and current business owners.
people developing models for reparations and Black empowerment. Also, justice. I want to throw it out there. Our universities in Pennsylvania, across the state, have I can't even think of the series that they're doing on this, but they've been raping and pillaging our Black communities and making horrible deals between the community and not following through on it. That's how they get their land. Look how University of Pittsburgh has grown into a whole other community that they call Oakland. That's not Oakland. Like, what's going on? I used to have interviewed kids about their neighborhoods. They were able to identify things about their neighborhoods that were real strengths and unique assets I found adults had a hard time seeing, and I'm always building on existing strengths. That's a very great point. On a university level, I feel that students are not included. Yeah. Danielle, I definitely thinking about university students. And this was something I worked on last year. University students, if you're organizing, they have the most time. They just need coaxing. They need molded. They need trust. The students are organizing on the inside. Well, how do we align with the organizing on the inside and create the inside outside game? Oh, but they're gonna take Sheridan too. The West Side is definitely going to take Sheridan. Those houses are beautiful. They have great bones. Sheridan is not going to be left alone. I really want folks to really process what is gonna happen. Who is guaranteeing? Okay, who is guaranteeing the plan will be implemented and effective? So we've gone through community development, right? And our primary boundary. Who is now the owner and responsible for this plan to not only be implemented, but for it to do what it said it was going to do? Banks. Ooh. Investors. Yep.
Who is? We'll get to who should after.
Yeah. Who is? Elected officials, developers, government oversight. We definitely haven't talked enough about the government. Contracts, laws. Okay, that's a good. So who should guarantee the plan will be implemented and effective? Thank you, Julius. Julius said, I feel like this gets left up to the people that live there, which we've discussed weren't included in the plan. Tech giants. This question is kind of flip-flop to every other question. And where Julius is at is exactly it, because the effective and the implement part are traditionally folks who have ownership or money or those things. But it's the community-based organizations. It's the community members. They're supposed to read these plans, the plan that did not include them, and they're supposed to interpret how this looks like, not have done this, and they're supposed to make sure it's effective. That's a lot of monitoring. Those are tools that are not in our communities. That's a type of capacity we don't have as community members that they've left up to the community. Ideally, residents would be organized to hold institutions accountable. In a perfect world, Gabe, right? But the folks who should guarantee the plan will be implemented and effective are, again, not part of the development. So this is that conflict. I wish I could go back to that slide, right? The conflict is the investors and the banks own this, right? The community has to make sure it's implemented and effective. And if it's not implemented and effective on their behalf, the banks and the investors will make sure it's at least on their behalf. At the very least, they will make sure they get an investment, they get a return. And the community is left because they weren't able to organize, they weren't empowered, they were stifled, they were silenced, they weren't part of the community process. All right, so do we have any more? I feel like, yep. Our zoning code should be designed for racial equity. Single family zoning is firmly rooted in racism. I can't talk about that today. It is, why are we having these 1-bedroom studio towers? What? This is a community where families will exist. You need families to sustain your community. Not 500 one single families to go and move to another community where they can have a house to raise their families. Dave, could you share what single family zoning is?
Single family zoning is zoning that does not allow you to build multifamily housing. So essentially, and this is most cities in America, you cannot build an apartment, you cannot build a multifamily unit, you can't get any density, which is one of the main drivers of lack of affordability.
Thanks, Dave. So I kind of skipped a question, but it's fine. I want you all to Google heuristic questions, because you can use this anywhere. It doesn't. I do this with all of my my consultations. I do this with engagements. This is how I deconstruct tools, and I'm very big on equity. So this is how I ensure equity in all of my processes in regards to organization development. So equity is not just in regards to diversity and inclusion. But if you're implementing a new software in your organization, or you're building a grocery store, equity is part of everything in our society, because every institution in our society is racist. So we need to ensure that we are creating fairness from a place of uplifting demographics that have been traditionally oppressed. So we have a couple minutes. So I want to ask, what are the different visions of what different visions of improvement are considered? So basically, whenever we're stock prices. Woo, that's a great one dealing with today. Dave put a link in the chat for more connections between single family zoning and racism and segregation. Thanks, Dave. When we're thinking about visions of improvement, property values, huge. That is how everyone justifies what they're doing, the property values, because that's more important. Crime rate, justification for policing. Thanks, Gabe. That's definitely next to property values. What makes your property value fluctuate? Crime. Making the neighborhood safe. I love the quotations. I quote things all day. Cleaning up the neighborhood. Code, all code, all code, all code. This is definitely how we silence people. So what different visions of improvement should be considered? Affordability, economic mobility for existing residents, walkability, accessibility.
Inclusivity.
Definitely. Yes, places for, we have to really start centering children. Environmental, no pollution, yep. Good school.
Good schools. Health outcomes. Yep, access to clean air, clean water, fresh food, household incomes.
That's a great one. Tell me if I'm wrong. When was the last time y'all saw an economic plan for our region?
The internet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about how we're in school in here, right? But now Wi-Fi has become a utility. Why are we not talking about this? Do we see children outside of? Nope, it's weird because once COVID happened, I started seeing kids more. It's very interesting. That is exactly going on our walks is when we start seeing children more. I'm glad. Okay, so it wasn't, yeah, great. Kim, could you, we're gonna launch the poll and close out. I want to thank you all today for being engaging and interactive. So there's a poll. We just want to get some more information on and feedback in regards to the workshop. And there's some information on my company, Leaders of Change. I also have a tech company I'm launching. It's an inclusion index for people to rate their employers. And then also on that website, there's just a repository of a ton of information, people to follow, Patreons, community organizations, as much as possible. You can find me on my website, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm pretty accessible around the city. But as we close out, I just have one question. This is how I close out this workshop. What are you, as the participants, what is something that you can do that can impact your system in regards to community development? My background's in change management, and the school of thought that I come from is we focus on one small change that can impact the entire system. Marilyn, go ahead, or can you, Marilyn?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Trying to help unmute you here. Did you have something you wanted to add, Marilyn? It's still on mute. There we go.
Okay. The schedule says this class is till 10:30.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I thought we had until 10.
I don't know. I wrote down the schedule. Let's see where it rolls.
We're on till 10. We can definitely, or 10:30, we can definitely push it out.
It says block 1, 9 to 10:30. It's up to you.
I'm just gonna,
Maybe Neil and Sonia, can you check on that and send us a message?
Yep, just a second.
Thank you. But we have some people, I think, answering your final question, Amber, in the chat here as well. Thanking you for this great workshop, magnificent workshop, rather.
thank you.
So we have the full hour and a half if you'd like to stay around.
Oh, so we do have another 30 minutes.
Wow.
And we skipped through a question too, even because we thought we were on a time crunch here.
Okay, so let's double back. If you all want to stay on, that's totally fine with me. We'll just keep the poll up.
Yeah, people are saying, knowledge is power. So sharing what they know and have learned, caring for neighbors one at a time, one step at a time.
Jessica has a great example. For staying on, can we talk about examples of where we see great community-led development in the Pittsburgh area? Pay attention to more important municipal county elections and offices. Oh, yep. Okay, so great community-led development. Let's
Make a
go.
comment.
Yeah.
Responding to Jessica, and this is just kind of what I've seen, and it might not be 100% accurate, but Homewood, there's a lot of, to me, I believe, community-led development in that area of the city that I've seen and been a part of, just conversations and going to different panels. So that's, and I don't know, maybe, but that's where I've seen Homewood.
Thank you, Markia, for sharing that. Also, in regards to great community-led development in the Pittsburgh region, if folks would like to share, they have plans for a Black-led co-op in Homewood. All right.
Someone's also asking if there's a place where your slides will be made available afterwards.
Yeah, you can email me and I'll send you the slides. I also have a longer workshop where there's about 8 or 7 more questions, and what we walk through is the workarounds.
Do you want to toss your email in the chat as well?
I'll just put my personal email because I don't know where it's coming from. So in regards to the question we skipped, let's go backwards. I apologize. We thought we were on till 10. Who is arguing a case of those who cannot speak for themselves? There we go. This is the part, is this methodology also effective in organizing change inside an organization? So actually, Julius, that's where I use it. I like to build the capacity of organizations in the community. So my strategy is an inside outside game. So internally, organizations need to deconstruct their own racist practices and policies and procedures, and any other type of discriminatory fashion that exists in that community, right? They can't engage the community until they've done that. Also, at the community level, the community needs to start processing how they're being left out, and what resources are at their disposal to be empowered to hold the community accountable. So Gabe had mentioned that traditionally the community will organize to hold the investors or the developers or the government accountable. But because of society, because of our day-to-day, the organizing has not been very responsive to how folks can't be part of this process. So it's just what internally, this is where it should exist at the board level. I'm teaching board members how to have these conversations. As an expert, as a subject matter expert, or as a support system in the universities or consulting, I'm teaching them how to, through this again, how to deconstruct their tools and interventions so they're not perpetuating these exclusive practices on their clients or customers, or when they're engaging the community. And then at a community level, helping community members create workarounds. Where part of this system do we have the leverages as a member, as an individual, but maybe as a street, or maybe as a church, or maybe as a group of parents, right? Again, in my world, Amber Thompson, can identify something in my community and create something that starts some other change or shift in the system. It may not impact the overall system, but during the diversity summit with Pitt, one of the librarians said, I'm responsible for helping the grad students and PhD students choose their research, choose their topics. And she's like, I have the influence here to say, do you want to do this from the perspective of the colonizer? Or do you want to do it from the perspective of the marginalized folks, or the folks that have been impacted, right? Where is your research lying? What's your intent over your impact? And that is something that she was just like, I didn't know I could do these things. We have to walk through these questions each other to be able to identify where our power lies as well. So yes, this could be done inside of your organization. This could be done in a corporation. Again, that's where I'm working at, board development. This could be done in your community. This could be done in your nonprofits. This could be done as an individual in your personal life. You can identify your values. Where's the conflict and where I'm working at? Where's the conflict of who I'm engaging? Where's the conflict of my politics, right? Sorry, I'm reading a comment. To be clear, that's super hard and lots of forces actively undermining community organizations. So I'm not blaming people for not having power. No, yeah. Definitely. That's definitely not what I read from that either. Read from that, Gabe. Yep. It's not, it is not our fault that these things are happening. What I want folks to understand is, like, even as a Black woman, if I existed within this system, I'm going to oppress my own people. Unless I understand with the work that I'm doing, and mitigate that risk, right? Council meetings. Folks don't know that they have a voice in zoning. Folks don't know they have a voice in council. They don't. They rely on mischievous or misleading developers and community organizations to say, we represent you. We'll be your voice. Don't worry about it. You don't have to go to this meeting. No, you can go down there on your own fruition, and you can voice your opinion. You can write in the city council. You can write your elected officials. I know my community, my state representatives are all accessible. I can email them. I can go to their offices. There's a lot of politicians now. I would definitely say differently of when I first moved here. But a lot of politicians now who are creating a type of politic where it's very community centered, it's centering the most marginalized folks, where they're soliciting that type of engagement. They're making decisions based on that type of engagement. It's not top down, it's bottom up. Politicians pay attention when a number of people show up. Their goal is to be reelected. Yep, we're in election season right now, aren't we? How many people have announced? Don't be fooled though. Don't be fooled. They want to get reelected, but the last 3 years they didn't do anything.
Yeah, I think it's challenging for, with everything that everybody's doing in their day-to-day lives to be informed about our politicians and what they actually have done for us in the past. But I think that's a key point, Amber, because that's where a lot of the power lies in the current structure, I think. And we've seen how that can shift.
Yes. Does anybody have any other questions? It looks like we're at 10:07. If no one else has any other questions or comments, or if anyone wants to walk through any other thoughts, we can do that. If not, we can wrap it up and I can give you about 20 minutes of your life. You could hang out and get ready for the next sessions.
I see we still have maybe 10 or 12 folks who haven't responded to the poll. We would really appreciate your feedback. So if you can just take a minute to answer, I think the 3 questions we have, we'd really appreciate it.
I wonder if you have any experiences of trying to make changes and getting pushback. Oh my Lord, that is my life. Yes, this is not easy. And if I made it seem like, oh, we just do this and it's so easy, it's not. It's stressful. Folks do not like changing. Status quo is where we're existing. Order is how our entire city, all of our leaders function in an orderly fashion. They do not want to be iterative. They don't want to change. So yes, I do get pushback. But I'm a firm believer in centering the most marginalized demographics. And I do a lot of research before I go into working with any of my clients and consultations to ensure that those perspectives are found. And if they're not existent there, that I am that voice and I can help the organization identify them. I recently did have like a wonderful breakthrough with a client because in this workshop that I do, the longer version, we create workarounds. Because there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of red tape. I'll get to that in a minute, Marilyn. There's a lot of laws and there's a lot of red tape. Again, what Gabe had said about organizing, there are a lot of barriers for organizers to do the work that they want to do in this city. And I got this from Dustin Gibson in regards to like trying to advocate for my daughter working with Pittsburgh public schools and just saying like, this is the language they use. I don't know how to like exist in this structure and exist in this institution. And that's the law. And he's like, well, slavery was legal too. That doesn't mean it was right. And that's how I navigate the pushback. I build trust by talking to folks and letting them know my company is a benefit corporation. It is like a for-profit nonprofit. I do not want to partake in the nonprofit industrial complex either. I want to pay all the people that work with me. I want to increase economics for marginalized folks, and that's where my social contribution is. So I'm not here to put profit over people. And I think once folks understand and build that trust, the people that push back, They want to control that primary boundary. They are vested. They do not want to relinquish influence or power or money, or they see less dollar signs. Where let's talk about community development when these developers say we can't afford that. What, you couldn't make $20 billion, but you still made $15 billion, and we still were able to keep the community members in our community were able to support them. Marilyn had asked, what and how do you do your research? So I use the quality or the quantitative pieces of like the census, right? There's a lot of demographic information. Well, we're on a new census now, but it's 10 years old. So wherever it's at, it's going to be worse. But then also in regards to marginalization, I look at those intersections immediately. Disability, status, immigration, refugee, second language. Then I look at gender. Well, gender and race are first, but then disability, and then age, veterans, those protected classes, gender, sexual orientation, all those protected classes, and then you have to break down that next level marginalization. It would be, Black, disabled folks, Black, in regards to LGBT, that is a spectrum. I would argue non-binary trans folks are going to be your next level. That's how I break down my marginalization. That's a lot of research, but I do that in every community. And while you might think every community has the same focuses, I work in one community where they're targeting Black high school students for employment. And I work in another community where they don't have a lot of children, period, any age. And not enough to say like this is an actual gap in our economy, in our local ecosystem. So I would do more, think of it as a globally, here are the demographics, hyper local focus of where do they exist in this place. And then after that, what do you mean by workaround exactly? What's an example? Let me think of a good example of a workaround. Oh, here's a great example, especially in regards to community development. Whenever someone had asked if I get pushback, yeah, I've received a lot of pushback for one of my tools. It's an advocacy tool to increase utilization of minority-owned businesses in the community development process. Now, if the community developers, the CDCs, and the banks don't want to do it, my workaround was to give it straight to the community members. I'm going to teach the community members how to use this tool and advocate for themselves versus implementing it in the community organizations where they don't want it for whatever reason. That's fine. I know this is something the community members will use, and that's what has happened. So community members, teaching them how to understand zoning, how to understand city council, how to report whenever minority-owned businesses are used to get a contract, but they're not used on that contract. Those are like OIG problems. That's misuse of funds. A lot of folks don't know those channels to report those. So that's that is, to me, that's a great example of a workaround in regards to this workshop. Our society is segregated and always has been. Can you talk about organizations, churches, for example, that are historically all mostly white, about how to become relevant, useful in current day and age? That I definitely encourage all white-led organizations in every decision that I speak to. So my local community organizations, the boards that I'm working with, to ask these questions and understand that they can't become relevant until they're not mostly white. So I have an equity process plan to help white folks be part of Black leadership and learn through experience. A lot of folks look at going into Black communities as political. But if you are there to support and you follow whatever codes of conduct, if that is not a space meant for you as a white person, don't partake in it. But it is through experience that white folks will have to do that work to be more inclusive in regards to their organization. So developing their boards, opening board spots, being in preparation of different perspectives, different work styles. There's a lot of development that has to happen internally in this city, specifically being one of the whitest cities. All of our organizations need to do, and it has to be real. And when you're working with folks who are in change management, and doing equity work, understand it's going to be very uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me. I'm anxious and stressed, but I also understand what's at stake. And false urgency. We have this knack of saying this is urgent, but what part of this is urgent if the folks who are impacted aren't here? I was part of something with hospital leaders who said it's urgent we address the inequities in our care for Black women, but it's not urgent for you to bring Black people to the conversation. It's very unhealthy for white folks to sit in rooms with other white people and make decisions about any minoritized population. And that it starts there. Look at that room and decide, are we the people that should be making this decision? And then ask these questions so you can identify how you can access those people. And then make sure you're not tokenizing folks. You pay them for their involvement, pay them for their work, pay them for their expertise in their life, because it makes your work better. If you're being very intentional, that's all part of justice and reparations. That's a very loaded question, Chris. There's just a very long process to do. But I would start with looking around the room, ask these questions, identify the marginalized folks, and then a strategy to connect with them. And understand trust has to be built. We cannot engage marginalized communities and expect that because I think I'm doing something for you, you should be gracious. I had a very interesting conversation in the sustainability space where as a white man said to me, I don't understand why I need to explain to people why clean air is important. Because the people you're talking to are more concerned with their lights being on tomorrow. They're not focused on what you're doing. So they're trying to get a job. They're trying to get food on their table. There was something in the...
Yeah, there's a couple more comments about needing more organizations and universities to turn down money when they're asked to be in the primary boundary, but shouldn't be.
We definitely need to have a conversation about turning down money. It is such a struggle to be in this space where we are in this philanthropic city where the foundations are really fragmented and splintered, and they don't understand racial equity. They don't understand equity, period, not even racial equity. So we are relying on these folks to give us money fitting into their quotas or their ROIs. And it's not in support of what our missions or our visions are for our communities. We definitely need to start turning down money, but we also need to start demanding more from these companies as corporations, and also creating our own in the form of co-ops or being more particular about where your money's coming from. I know one of my clients, they're part of fundraising. They're creating a whole blueprint of where their funds will now be coming from. They're changing their fundraising model because of what's going on. So it's difficult. Again, it's not easy. It's difficult. And it means struggling. It means having less money. But in preparation of a better world. That's what this is. It leads to doing bigger things. And personally to me, I feel like you still would make money. I'm not from the firm believer of, if we turn on this, we're not going to have money. There are a bunch of companies that are trying to do better. I gave you targeted example. There are benefit corporations globally that are giving their Ben & Jerry's is a great example, trying to get back to community, focusing on reparations and justice. It's definitely a slow burn. You're fighting years and years of programming that people don't realize they've received.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it's a
Thank
great point.
Mhm. Yeah. It definitely, that's why it's hard. And where I focus at is that small change, because I know it's going to keep building and building. I kind of look at it in a non-linear process. It's not first this, then this, then this. Where are the avenues? Where can we go short term? Where can we go fast? And working in sprints, how can we pivot and pivot and pivot? And then how can we bring more people as we go along the way? It is a struggle. It most certainly is. Especially I feel like in this region, or, it's not only this region, but globally, folks just don't understand equity. It's easy to say representation. It's easy to check a box. It's easy to say, here, come to the table. I know the last workshop, we were like, get rid of the table. Stop with this table. Open sources. Like, So we are wrapping up. Thank you, Marilyn. Again, folks, you can email me. I will go to the last slide so you can see my contact information as well. This was great this morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. I know there's a couple workshops I'm looking into. And I think we're going to end it and close out early. No, thank you for joining the conversation. I appreciate your awareness and upfrontness about difficulty and slowness. Not futility. Yeah. This is the work that I do, and this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. So hopefully we can all join it together, right? Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to close out. Have a nice weekend.